Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Let's start. When I was 15 years old, I'm trying to decide how far back to go with this to start the story. Let's go back a little bit further. My parents divorced when I was 13. And myself and my sister ended up living with my dad, staying with my dad for financial reasons. It was just easier. And all around, at 13, you don't really understand what's going on. Anyway, you just don't. So that changes things, you kind of grow up quick when you go through that, and so many, it's not so taboo anymore, it's a common occurrence. Sadly, it is a common occurrence. And when I was 15, my mother was dating this guy. His name is Roger. And Roger didn't like us kids. And we didn't know why. And when you're that, you don't understand you don't get it. You don't understand. And you couldn't figure out what it is that you did or do, but your mere presence seems to anger him. Realized later on that he was one of those guys that if I can't have her, nobody can, and so the children should not be in her life because she was his. My mother was a tiny little Filipino woman who stood roughly about 5 foot tall. I'm just shy of 5'8", and was back then. And so when I hugged her, I could rest my chin on the top of her head. And she was just this tiny little thing. Had broken English, Oh, honey. My bestie's probably laughing right now because she hears her voice all the time. I miss that voice, even so many years later. I miss that voice. Try not to get emotional. It's easier when I write it because, I can compartmentalize. I'm very good about that. It's different when you're looking at yourself, realizing that you're talking to many people. Anyway, moving on. Back to him not liking us kids. We're talking throw gasoline in my mother's face, not liking us kids for no apparent reason. We're talking chasing my sister down the hallway with a shotgun, not liking us kids. And the piece de resistance was December 19th, 1990. I went grief is a funny thing, isn't it? I went to my mother's apartment because I needed a rosary for theology class the next day. And she had this beautiful one, which I have. Some of you have seen it in my no hate pictures. It's the one that I hold. It's in a box in my bedroom. Anyway, she was gonna let me borrow it. it was Christmas time, and Roger was supposed to be in Texas visiting family. So I thought it was okay to go and pick it up, and a friend of mine went with me. We were singing Christmas carols and New Kids on the Block, which I'm a blockhead for life, and their music, this is just the side story, has, when I was a teenager, got me through a lot. Anyway, so I walked upstairs, and I can still smell the hallway. I can still close my eyes and remember the dark brown and the dirty carpet and stale cigarette smoke. And my friend stayed in the car because I was just going to run up really quick and get it. And I knocked on the door, and I heard some rumbling around, and the door opened, and it was Roger. And I was not expecting that, or him, for that matter. He looked me up and down. That slow, disgusting once over. And hollered back over his shoulder in his white wife beater and dirty jeans. And alcohol infused aura. He shouted over his shoulder, "Hey, Maria, your daughter's here." And he looks me up and down again and says, "Pretty one." And he licks his lips, and he slowly backs up and sits back down at the dining room table. When you walk in the apartment, there was a brown table to the left, and to the left of that was the galley kitchen, and straight ahead was the living room and the sliding glass doors and the blinds, and then down the hallway to the left, it's the bedroom and the bathroom. I can still see the layout of my mother's apartment in my head. There were beer bottles all over the empty beer bottles all over the table and along the ledge of the window, the cutout of the galley kitchen. And he sat down at the table and he was shuffling cards. And I just stood in the doorway frozen, like, so many thoughts. Why is he here? He's not supposed to be here. Why? Why is he here? And he tells me, "Oh no, just stand there. You know how to play cards?" Still leering at me. "You know how to play cards? I'll teach you how to play cards. Come sit on my lap." I had no words. And my mother comes down the hallway, and she's wearing this oversized man's shirt, button-up dress shirt, and nothing else. She might have had shorts on, but she was so tiny that the thing came down to, like, it looked like a nightshirt on her. And tired. She was so tired. And looking back now, I understand that was defeat. It's defeat. And she looked at me and said, "Oh, honey, hi." Smile didn't reach her eyes. Hey, Mom, do you have the rosary? Oh, yeah. Let me go get it. Okay. She comes back out with it, and I hug her fiercely, and I ask her if everything is okay. Oh, yeah. I'm okay. It's okay. Honey, you go. It's okay. But I knew that it wasn't. I just got this really bad feeling, and I left there. My gut. You know, when you're 16, what are you gonna do? You don't know then. You know, you feel creeped out, and you feel gross, like you need to bathe in bleach, and that objectified, and you know, all those things that when you're 16 you don't know what that means. You know, I didn't know. I just know how I felt, and I didn't feel okay. And Fred and I drove back, and she kept asking me if everything was okay, and I just kept saying, I don't. Yeah, she said it's fine, but I don't have a good feeling. I went home, and it was about 9:30 at night when I had gone there. I had finished work and headed over, and by the time I got back, it was probably 10:30, 11 o'clock. Just lived on the other side of town. And I couldn't sleep. I could not sleep. And I just laid there and I stared at the ceiling, and at about 3 o'clock in the morning when my dad knocked on my door. I softly said, yeah. And he opened it. And he didn't say a word. I just kept staring at the ceiling and said to him, she's dead, isn't she? And he said, yeah, honey. You know, Christmas tree lights were still on in the living room, and we had this big chair that sat in front of it, and I remember getting up and walking past him and just sitting in that chair for hours staring at the Christmas tree. And the thing that stands out for me the most about that moment is listening to Jordan Knight, New Kids on the Block was on the radio, and I think it was Christmas Carol, or Christmas song. I don't remember. I have it written down somewhere, but off the top of my head, I don't remember. And right after that, as the sun was starting to come up, we had this big bay window in the back, and the Christmas tree sat in front of it. And I remember the dawn and Louis Armstrong singing "What a Wonderful World." And I had seemingly no tears left until that song came on. Angrily thought, yeah. So, as the story goes, after I left the apartment Roger beat and raped my mother and left her for dead. I didn't know he had left her for dead and that she was still alive, barely hanging on to life. I thought that she was already gone. I didn't know until just in recent years that she was still alive when he left. But it had no hope and didn't stay alive for long. He took off and retreated and hid in the bathtub of his ex-girlfriend's house until the police found him. Imagine 16 years old. You have a daughter that's 16. If you have kids, imagine this. Your 16-year-old daughter being the last one to see their mother alive and being a witness on the stand during his murder trial and having to go through that. I remember clearly looking across the courtroom when I was up on that stand and steeling myself to look directly at him, knowing what he did and watching. They wheeled that, that cart that you have in grade school where you used to, this is dating myself quite a bit, but with a little TV that you could watch, videos on, school videos and whatever. And they had one of those in the courtroom and had still shots of the crime scene. Whew. Does something to you when you sit like that. So many people watching you, watching the monitor and watching the still pictures, the grainy black and white of the police going through your mother's apartment and having to see her broken and bruised body on the floor. My testimony helped put him away. I had the option of not doing it, of not getting up on the stand. That was never the option to not, that never even I was going to do that. And then nobody was going to stop me. He was sentenced to life without possibility of parole. And it was the first case in Des Moines of domestic abuse, of murder, by domestic abuse that resulted in a conviction of life without the possibility of parole. Although he does try every year. My sister keeps up with that. I lived in fear of that being a possibility for many years, and of retaliation. And there's still that part of me, deep in the recesses that sits hovering like that's a possibility. I push it as far back as I can, but there are moments and days like this that everything comes rushing to the surface. Get help, get out. It wasn't until later, when we were cleaning out her apartment, that we found pamphlets on how to get help if you are in a domestic abuse situation. She tried as best that she could, I think in the end she just part one of that trilogy that makes me who I am today, for good, bad, or otherwise.